Now, most of us do remember what a Sunday looked like in our memories and how different a rest day was around 50 to 60 years ago. So let's look how less we did and what was not expected of us on that Sunday morning lay-in. With the fast pace of life today, some feel that every day of the week seems exactly the same. Not because of the boredom or every mundane day being the same, not at all, but how the pace of life is very much the same for many of us. Now you'll find that some will argue that it is, but you'll find today that older people who still respect that day of rest, Sunday is important for themselves and for their families. But what we're going to talk about today will offer a massive difference of how Brits spent their Sundays not so many years ago and how different it all was. Yes, Sunday the day of rest, with a paper boy or paper girl delivering a handful of Sunday newspapers with supplements. Most parents would be out of their bed and waiting for the thud on the hall floor and spend at least an hour or more over breakfast reading practically every item before tackling the crossword. Relaxing. Today, the paper delivery or even the physical copy of the newspaper has vastly declined. In our busy lives, who would have time to read them? It was a day off, and even though some jobs did demand weekend working, but for the many of us it really was a part of the weekend where the streets were quiet and you could hear the church bell ringing, and many kids went out to Sunday school, which gave the parents a chance to even relax even more on that quiet Sunday morning, because they didn't drive you there. Kids walked safely. Apart from that stroll to your local shop, the towns were as quiet as midnight in the forest. Hardly a car would pass by, the odd person walking through those empty streets and maybe stopping to look into a shop window before metal shutters were needed, and maybe on their way to visit a friend. Every hairdresser, large shop, amusement place or cafe would be shut. Can you remember that sound of almost silence in a town street, where you could actually hear the birds? Empty streets for some reason seemed longer, free of traffic, noise and crossings that went silent, and car parks empty. Today, what is a Sunday like? More traffic, shops open for business, as usual, and just as busy as most Saturdays. And those same car parks full of people looking desperate to park as near to those massive supermarkets as they can. Or those going on to markets or car boot sales, filling their bags with at least one item that they particularly don't want or need. Even the buses were seldom, maybe once an hour if you were lucky, and practically no trains at all, not locally. But they were almost empty anyway. They ran too early because the driver had less reasons to stop. Back in our homes, the smell of roast in the oven, slowly cooking, was the norm. The preparation would start in the morning in the kitchen, and it would be ready for about 1 o'clock, all cooked from scratch. No prepared vegetables or gravy granules or microwave ready meals. And if you weren't there, then you had your dinner left in the oven, with a plate on top on a regular gas marked 1/4. Leave it too late and it was very dried up. So how did people pass those long hours on a Sunday with nothing on the TV? No online shopping, or text messaging, or tweeting. Well, kids did the homework, reading from books and writing in books, with double writing for older kids. Joined up writing with a fountain pen. Remember that? Hard to do and hard to read, not forgetting the ink blocks all over the pages that you got told off for. Then came Sunday evening, and an early night was expected. but not before that traditional tea of sandwiches, homemade cake, jelly for the kids. No one was delivering pizza or burgers or fries. In fact, no disturbance at all, because no one was going to come knocking on that door. Not while Bullseye or the Golden Shot were on. Not forgetting the Sale of the Century, that quiz of the week from Norwich, no less. The one that you could buy a car for 12 quid. Now, earlier I mentioned quiz shows and how they make celebrities out of contestants, and I want to talk about this. There was something warm and real when contenders were a little bit shyer, when they told a story about themselves with the help from a compere. Now, their stage clumsiness was just so much more natural. Now, is it me, or are contestants today louder, waving the hands in the air like they were stars themselves, and are more high-rate than they were in the past? And as for the audience, well, they all scream, and it's well over the top. Okay, it is probably me, but I wonder how many people still watch Bullseye today on Challenge TV. I forgot something about noise. A lawnmower, usually petrol. Yes, Sunday was the day of mowing lawns. There were. Dad's job, and for those who had one, was always cleaning the car, hosing it down just to get out the house. People seldom drove to a car valeting place. It was soap and water and a bit of scrubbing. And don't forget that the ashtrays were emptied too. Mother would stand at the window in the living room overseeing the garden and making sure that nothing was missed and no roses were ever pruned or over-pruned. Just one thing of interest now, perhaps I don't remember this, but in 1972, or just before 1972, no clocks to adjust. The experiment of turning clocks forwards and backwards for that extra bit of morning light was an experiment between 1968 and 1971, and it was made permanent the following year. Now, I'd love to hear, if you care to comment, whether you prefer the clocks to stay as they are all year round. But interestingly, during the World War II, there was a 2-hour clock adjustment for all over Britain, and this was to help manufacturing munitions and the less blackout time. Question: would you go back? Now, if I had a time machine to take you back to the 1960s and 70s, would you take a lift? I imagine many would. But it's nostalgic and it's great to talk about it and share memories. So thank you.